AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.
Historia Canadiana is recorded on the unceded lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka First Nation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Cultural History of Canada. My name is Patrick, and with me, as always, is Mackenzie Doodledoo. What's up?
Cockle-doodle-doo!
Every time we try to take the show seriously, just immediate derail.
No, you try and take it seriously. I try and take it like a joke.
So
Take it over a barrel.
just drop it over Niagara Falls. So, sorry for the delays in episodes. Just life happened.
Life.
Yep.
It's
As always.
it's a busy time of the year.
Yeah. It's midterms.
But hey, when
and
isn't it, folks? You know?
drink? No. I
Remember
was
to
gonna
drink
say
water,
drink.
hold your loved ones close, and tell them you love them. That's our episode. Thanks for listening. Cheers.
Bye. Yeah, there's nothing else we can teach you. Just learn the meaning of life. Love. um, Before we get started on today's episode, thank you everyone who supports us on Patreon. We'll probably release a Pop Canada soon because we haven't in a bit. So if you want to do that, you could do so for $1 or $3 a month. We're probably the only show on the face of the planet that's still this inexpensive for Patreon support.
Woohoo!
Yay! And yeah, just keep us posted on anything and everything that you like or dislike about the show. It's always nice. All right, so this is probably going to be a bit of a shorter episode, just conceptually. I don't know where this is going to take us. I had this idea when I first was conceiving of the show that one day we would talk about this, and
hmm
yeah, we'll just see where it goes. That's it. It's a vibes episode. It's a concept episode. So Mac, if I were to ask you, if you were to sum up in a single thesis statement, what are the main elements that led to Canada's formation as we know it today? What would you say if you had to dumb it down into a thesis statement?
Of what? How did Canada become Canada?
Yeah, like what are the qualities that made it become what it is, either abstract or concrete?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. So I'll handle this a couple different ways because if we want to think in a very practical sense of like why Canada was Canada, we had lots of beavers.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make beaver fur hats.
Yes.
Like in a very practical, and that's where everything has gone from there.
Mm.
People want our shit. People want our beaver hats. People want our lumber. People want our this. They want our that. Now they want our water.
Yeah.
Like we just have lots of stuff that people want.
Mhm.
And you know, the government is more than willing to get pegged and give it to them.
Okay. Yeah. Mhm.
That's been true since John A. Macdonald was
That's been true
probably, I
since
don't know.
before we even had prime ministers.
Yeah, but you know, Johnny A is probably the one most famous for going into backroom deals, smoking cigars, and doing questionable stuff.
Yeah.
And then talking to his dead mother or whatever.
Oh,
Or was that a different prime minister?
That was Mackenzie King.
Yeah, sorry. But again, like in a very practical sense, we are basically a country because we have something people want, always.
Mhm.
Now, if you want to talk about conceptual and what makes Canada Canada, it's hard to pin on one specific thing. I think part of it is, as we've sort of discussed in Pop Canada and sort of mentioned here, we're a very hardy folk insofar that like we have a lot of things that we've had to stand in adversity to, the cold winters and all that sort of thing. And I think one of the key things is that inverse to other countries like say Russia or whatever that have also had to stand in adversity, instead of being stoic, we turn to laughter. We laughed at our own absurdity, and we laughed at our own this is we would literally just went, this is nonsense, man. Like what are we supposed to do with this?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
we've got a whole subset of people that basically want to make their own country because they speak a different language. What do
Yeah.
you do with that, man?
Yeah. What was that Ray Bradbury quote? Sometimes it's an appropriate response to reality to go completely insane. Is that kind of what you're
Yeah,
getting
that
at?
like yeah, I feel like that sums up a fair bit of Canada as well. Now, if you were, and then this is a debate me you've just had personally of when Canada became Canada, you
Sure.
know?
Yeah.
Was it the big confederation? Was it earlier? Was it later? Like that's a question you're never going to answer. And I think the safest answer really is we're still not in our final form.
Right.
Like as a country, we haven't peaked yet. We haven't hit our stride really. Because we're still a country that, again, since we're always about giving people what they want, we've never given ourselves what we needed.
Hmm. I think you're
If
being
anything, I
very
think,
idealistic.
sorry?
I think you're being very idealistic. I hope that's true, but I don't know if we haven't reached our peak yet.
No, I mean, I don't mean like peak isn't necessarily our best, but I meant more in like we're still figuring out who we are.
Oh, okay, in that sense. Yeah, sure, sure, sure,
Because
sure.
we just haven't gone through the same kinds of, we've gone through adversity, yes, in the form of like the nature and natural elements, but we haven't gone through conflict in the same way that a lot of other countries had, you know?
Right, right.
Now the US, which like has been around the same amount of time,
Hmm.
it went through a lot of conflict, so its identity was forged in the crucible that way.
Right.
Our identity has never really been forged because we've never really had to forge an identity.
So,
If anything, we're seeing our identity be forged in real time in the modern day with actual threats to Canada at the moment.
right, right. I could see
Like
that.
we're seeing more in a coalition and a coalescence of Canadian identity in reaction to American imperialism than we've ever seen before.
Right. The only thing I'll add on to that, I agree as an overall rule. Um, the only thing I'll add
I
to that
agree,
is,
except you're wrong.
yeah, it's good. We've seen a lot of um, we've seen a lot of theories that you're advancing that formulate that as the culture itself, right? And I'm just going to mute myself because there's noise in the background, so just give me a sec. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So the idea would be that what you're describing is the culture rather than a lack of culture. I don't know if you
What do you mean?
would agree. So a lot of, I'm thinking of like the classic Northrop Frye or Margaret Atwood thesis of the garrison mentality or survival, right? And that being the foundation for a lot of, for example, literary culture
Mm,
in Canada, right? Um, and this seeking after a lack or engagement with a profound, disconcerting view of the world, right? As this like weird outside force, right? That sometimes makes us laugh and sometimes makes us go completely insane is the culture. There's a lot of issues with that, I would find, but I think it is something that
I
people
don't
have
think
thought
there's
of.
never going to be one perfect idea to it. Like it's a country. It's a very
Yeah,
complicated issue.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
And
So,
again, it depends who you ask. If you ask any like diehard Quebecois, they're going to have a very specific answer.
mhm. Although,
If you ask many diehard Albertans these days.
yeah, yeah. Although surprisingly, a lot of it is rather similar to what everyone else will say, just hyper localized, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, as much as I do think there is a distinctive nature to a lot of the provinces in Canada, a lot of them are very similar, right? Like, and at the core of what they discuss, there's not there is a lot of overlap, right? It's in the same way that like if you ask a conservative what they mean by traditional values, no matter where they
Hmm.
are, they'll kind of come back to the same points over and over again of like strong families, communities that love themselves, and then it just kind of
Yeah.
like fizzles out, or like strong values or something like that. Um, so the reason why I asked you the question, right, is because around the time that we're discussing, like right now in our broad history of Canadian culture and vision, so roughly World War II era, for some reason, people were really interested in developing like clear theses about what exactly led to the formation of Canada as a nation state.
Right.
Um, and we can talk about like why that would be. Obviously, World War II is one of the reasons why. World War One and Two is like one of the core reasons why, but we can maybe like unpack that a little bit. Um, but what I thought would be kind of interesting to do today is go over what some of these theses are and evaluate their merits with the hindsight that we have today. Right? Because some of these were written almost 100 years ago, and obviously things change, people change, but I think that there's still something there to some of these theses. Um, and I figured that as an English teacher, you never get enough of theses, right? And thesis statements, which I'm
And
sure.
feces.
Yes, exactly. 10 out of 10 joke. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is why they pay you the big bucks. Yeah.
This is why I'm Canadian.
Oh, God. So I kind of put these in random order to be honest, more or less of time when they appeared. But you've already
Yeah.
hit on some of them. Either I don't know if you read through the notes, but you've already hit on some of them just in your broad explanation, namely the staple thesis, right? That's kind of the one that people still think of today.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah. So
Let's start with the frontier thesis.
what would you say the frontier thesis is? Go. Just
Well,
based off
so
the name.
yeah, I mean, just based off the idea, I think this is something we've also discussed before
Mhm.
in our discussion of what makes Canadian literature Canadian.
Yeah.
But it's based around the idea that in America, one of the main defining times was when they explored their frontier and they went west. You know, cowboys and all. The cowboy, the idea of the cowboy is one of the most standout symbols of American culture ever, if not the most standout symbol of American culture.
Yeah.
And I think you would have to say it would be something similar for Canada, even though it went west and explored its frontier a little bit later.
Yeah. Like 10 years later, more or less.
But I think, yeah, the idea must be in that exploration and that move westward is when Canada became Canada.
Yeah.
And technically speaking, yeah, that geographically, that's when most of Canada like found itself in the provinces and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So
I think
in a geographic sense.
Yeah. So I think that term geography is really useful here. At its core, this is a geographic thesis. Okay? And each of
Yeah.
these theses have like a different methodology that they're focusing on, right? Geography, economics, history, right? Each of them is going to kind of choose its own little
Yeah.
thing.
And that sort of shows that sort of is both their strength and their downfall. Because geographically doesn't take in all the other factors at the core of like the founding of Canada. It also doesn't take into the fact that like BC was already a place.
Yeah. But we'll just kind of ignore that.
Ignore that.
But
We're
so-
just gonna ignore the founding of one of the first big Chinatowns.
and like California as well, if you want to take the American example, right?
Yeah.
But so here's the thing.
We're just
right?
gonna ignore that and build a railway.
But here's the thing. It's like it kind of ignores
Choo
it.
choo, motherfucker. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Thomas the tank engine is fed up with your bullshit.
Thomas had never seen such bullshit in his life. Such BS? No, BC.
So here's the thing, right? That criticism works. if you imagine the frontier as a purely east to west thing, right? Which we've often
Well, also-
conceptualized it as.
I can't express this one point enough. It only works if you completely, utterly, totally erase all indigenous activity.
That is going to be. You hit the nail on the head for so many of these theses. They could not care less about indigenous peoples, right? Or they care about them only insofar as they are like a labor and material resource.
Oh,
Right?
well, it's the same in America. Any frontier theses is like you bring in Native Americans as the enemy you are
Yeah,
conquering in your frontier.
yeah. Or to integrate them into the farming that you're establishing. Yeah,
Yeah.
which you saw
Yeah,
here.
integrate is the very kind word to
Yes,
use, I think, in this
assimilate,
situation.
right? Genocide, whatever
Oh,
you want to use.
assimilate. Yeah, there you go. Genocide. That's the
Mhm.
one.
Yeah, yeah.
Devastate,
Whatever term you want to use at a particular
annihilate,
moment. Yeah.
dominate.
We can keep going. This is just going to be an episode of Thesaurus.
The big R word
The big R
that
word. Yeah,
makes
yeah.
me the big R word that I would be uncomfortable. Is like I will joke about a lot of things, but I feel I would not say that one as a joke.
No. Um, but here, so that's the thing. It's like this interpretation, you're right, started off as an interpretation of American history and was famously put forward by a man called Frederick Jackson Turner in 1893. And
And
what's
then Canada
interesting,
adopted it.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, 10 out of 10 theses. That's actually perfect. That's actually the most fucking Canadian thing we could have done.
But
Like, I'm sorry, but that's
I knew
actually
you were
the
going to
most
love that.
Canadian thing.
We just stole an American thing.
Welcome to Pop Canada.
But so Turner was interested in this thesis because as he was developing it, the frontier, as you described it, right, the cowboys and Indians, that type of like
Pow, pow,
idealized
pow.
frontier was disappearing. It was pretty much coming to an end by that point.
Oh, yeah. By the 1920s? Is that when Canada started adopting it?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, yeah. It was
Yeah, we were
certainly
in the
before.
roaring 20s.
Yeah, exactly. And like technically, we had just instituted provinces like Alberta, right? It had developed in I think it was created in 1910 from memory. I could look this up, but I won't. Um, maybe 1901, doesn't matter, right? So the at the very end of the century, there were still some areas that were not formally quote unquote provinces. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
way too late in the game as far as like frontier cowboy stuff is concerned. Um,
I'm a lonely cowboy and I'm a long way from home.
the basic idea, I think, has some merit to it, right?
Oh, it does. Like I'm not gonna say it. And again, me and you have discussed this. Canadian literature is basically based on movement and the fact that we are always moving from one place to another, settling new
Mhm.
cities, farmland. Like it's not a horrible thesis.
No,
It's
exactly.
just like all the other ones where it has a couple of glaring, massive holes to
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Like, because just to put it really succinctly, the basic idea was that the more Americans or Canadians moved westward, right, or northward in our case, from British Columbia north or British Columbia east and Quebec west and so on, or the Maritimes west, and kind of met in the middle. With each successive movement towards the frontier, you got further and further away from like the quote unquote European core, right? The metropolis that established it. And so it kind of forced the people who were there to reinvent themselves. And that's what led to some kind of national self-determination because they were increasingly left to their own devices, right? And had to create their own thing, right?
And that reinvention resulted in them not wanting to die. That was the
Right.
reinvention. We are trying to avoid death by dysentery.
Yeah, exactly. Death by dysentery, cultural
Welcome,
death, right? Like
welcome to
whatever
the
you want to
Oregon
put.
Trail,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Vancouver Trail,
yeah.
Victoria Trail.
But yeah, exactly. Like this.
Hi-ho, Yukon. Sorry.
It's fine, right? But you can see why this would be so appealing towards the end of the 19th century, as there was a time of like growing national feeling and wanting to explain national differences, right? Like this really fits into that mold, 100%. Right? I don't. You look like you're unsure about this one.
No, I see it. I agree with it. It also, but that means we need to take into account
Mhm.
the frontier of like going up.
Yeah, that's right.
That would have been part of it, the frontier. And in that sense, it's not done since we haven't really settled the frontier of the north.
More or less. I'm sure a lot of Inuit communities up there would disagree with that.
Oh,
Right?
100%. The same way the Métis would disagree with it, but
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Um, so
but if we listen to every indigenous complaint, we'd be here all day. So
ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba.
Boy, I'm depressed now.
Yeah, but I mean, you do see it on a certain extent, right? I was actually at a workshop yesterday where an Inuit person was talking to us about how to decolonize the classroom and so on. It was really interesting talk. Natasha
Mm,
McDonald is her name. So, and she gave a bit of statistics where a lot of communities up north don't speak their language anymore, which you wouldn't expect, right? In part because of what you were
yeah,
saying, right? Of like, well, it's further up north, they're more isolated, they would be more protected, culturally speaking, right?
but
Yeah, but it's something like 20% of communities, I think, in the Yukon who actually speak their native languages. Um, Nunavut is the outlier, right? They still speak. I think it's 90% still speak their indigenous languages, but that's an
mm,
exception to the overall rule. So you still do see effects in the 21st century of this kind of frontier thesis, right? Of reinventing cultures in order to fit the necessities, the perceived necessities of frontier life, right?
yeah,
Um, I don't know. As someone who's been to the Yukon, I'm sure you would have seen some version of this.
yes, actually I
Right.
did.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, that took a second.
Sorry, I had to bring back those memories. It was a while ago.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to add onto this frontier thesis
No,
as a
again,
thing?
it's very geographical,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's a good starting theory insofar that like it lays out a lot of the highlights, but also the problems. Like it hits
Mhm.
some key areas that are important, but it also misses out on some key aspects.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think the idea of it being foundational is rather important because this was pretty much the ruling theory until the wars, right? And it's
Until
really,
the Laurentian thesis.
yeah, more or less. That was like the first major pushback against it, right? So, what
What's
would
the
be the,
Laurentian
yeah,
thesis?
just again, we'll keep going on this. Based off the name, what do you think the Laurentian thesis might be?
The St. Lawrence.
Yep. It's another geographic one, but like more localized, basically.
More Quebecois is how I read this.
More Eastern, we'll say. Well,
Except it's not the Maritimes.
yeah, it's true. I guess it doesn't quite reach to the maritime. Maybe a bit of New
Quebec
Brunswick.
is not the East Coast, Patrick, okay? Get your shit together.
I'm saying that it also goes
Don't
into
get the
Ontario
Newfies
and a bit
after
of New
us.
Brunswick.
But
Doesn't
again,
it?
this one definitely feels like I don't know, Quebec trying to make itself feel special by being east of the river.
But here's the thing. It wasn't even developed by Quebecois people. The people who developed it were like English-speaking Canadians from Ontario.
I
It had
still blame the
nothing.
Quebecois.
It had nothing to do with Quebecois historians.
The thing, this is Ontario people wanting to shut Quebec off on its own into its own little place.
So the main
Literally, we will use the river as a border if we could.
the the main person
And then we called
who
it Gatineau.
the main person who developed this idea, right, or who kind of sustained its expression most was a historian by the name of Donald Crichton, who deserves an
Right.
episode all on its own. He basically revitalized
He
what it
wrote
meant.
Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, that was Michael Crichton.
But he basically is known for revitalizing the field of history and what it means to write history in Canada, right? He would
Like
write a lot of,
dinosaurs.
yes, like dinosaurs. Actually, he wrote a biography of a dinosaur in writing a biography of John A. Macdonald.
Okay, I thought he actually wrote a biography of a dinosaur. And I was like, that's fucking baller. Can we read that book for our channel? I'd actually read that book from cover to cover.
Oh, God. That's so funny. I wish. Crichton would have no patience for that. He would be too conservative for that shit, but it would have been so
Ugh.
funny to have his writing style be applied to dinosaurs. Um, But what's interesting is that, as I was saying, the Laurentian thesis is a little bit of a response to the frontier thesis, which Crichton perceived as being rather continentalist, right? Insofar as like it diminishes the uniqueness of both Canada and the United States by lumping them all together as like frontier states. Okay.
Mm.
Um, Which I can see why he made that point. He was a nationalist, right? Crichton was someone who took Canada as a unique nation state to heart, right, as an idea. Um, but he basically applied the same idea of the frontier, but said, no, well, it's a bit different for Canada because we have the St. Lawrence, right? And
Yeah.
to use his term, Canada was based off of an empire of the St. Lawrence, right? Like without the St. Lawrence and what it allowed fur traders and the British to do, there would be no Canada. As we understand it today, it would basically be the US. So it's a bit of a geographic argument, right? But it's also a bit of a,
It attempts to be a bit of economics.
yeah, it's a bit of everything, which is classic Crichton. He just kind of pick and chooses from a bunch of stuff and tries to make it fit into a nice little bow.
Box.
Yeah, a nice little narrative. Um, and to be fair to him, he is a very good writer and manages to make that into a nice little narrative. Um, but yeah, I feel like it's a bit of wishful thinking. I don't know what you think about it.
It's again, it like it ignores even more than the other ones, just everything out west.
Uh huh.
And it also very much ignores the Maritimes as like a key part of development.
Yeah,
It again, it's very localized, centralized. It very much feeds into the narrative that Ontario and Quebec are the only important parts of Canada.
right. Or at least the foundational basis of it, right? Because his major
Which
point is that without the St. Lawrence, you can't get into the West, for example.
which yeah, technically is true, but it's also that's very limiting in its scope.
Hmm. Yeah,
That doesn't let you like treat Canada as something that can grow and get bigger.
exactly. Um, there were critics of the St. Lawrence thesis or the Laurentian thesis from its get-go. There was another famous
Mm.
historian, a more liberal-minded historian called W.L. Morton, who warned of the potential for cultural and regional exploitation inherent in the expansion of central Canadian commerce and institutions, right? So basically, his idea that everything else, kind of like what you're saying, is subsumed to the cultural hegemony of Ontario and Quebec, right?
Yeah.
In that thesis or in that purview. Um, but it is a bit hard to argue from an economic standpoint, right? Like a lot of what we're able to do resource wise was for a long time centered around the St. Lawrence, right? And the waterways. That's a bit hard to ignore, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, very romantic, right? I would say as a as an idea, which is not necessarily. It can be a good thing, but I think this is probably one of the weaker theses out of the ones that we're going to be seeing today.
The
Right?
Laurentian?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't again, it's very much of an old mindset of what Canada is.
Hmm. Yeah. Which again, at this point, the West, the not the West, sorry, the prairie provinces had barely been a part of Canada at this point,
Right.
right? Like they would not have been like super culturally distinct as far as like a lot of historians are concerned, culturally or intellectually distinct. Which is not to say that they weren't, but they were not perceived as such by a lot of people, right? And so there's still that sense that, well, no, Canada is still mostly on the borders, right, or on the
Hmm.
outskirts, I would say. Um, yeah, I don't know. Anything else you wanted to add on this before we get into probably the more interesting ones, in my opinion?
No, that seems about right.
Okay. Staples thesis, or the staple thesis. Sometimes it's pluralized, sometimes it isn't.
Staples.
Go. What do you think that is? Staples.
Why go anywhere else?
Yay!
This one, like,
So this one's a conspiracy theory. Like Innes thought that everything was in Canada was to be able to put documents together.
what?
I'm joking. I'm joking. Like
Thank
I'm making a joke
God.
on Staples. It's not a
Okay.
conspiracy theory.
Well, what is the Staples theory? Run it by me.
So in this case, it's economic. Economic or resource staples, right? So you mentioned beavers at the start of the episode, right? What other
Yeah.
type of economic staples would we have in Canada, historically speaking? Right? We would have
Timber,
wood.
lumber.
Yep. What
Okay,
else?
well, don't have wood right now. That's not good.
So yeah, timber, beaver. What else?
Beavers. Right now, water.
Water, huge one.
Yeah, just
Yep.
in general, water. Um, comedy.
I don't think Innes would have considered that as an exportable resource, unfortunately.
I mean,
I say
Jim
Innes.
Carrey, Mike Myers.
Yeah. Minerals were a huge one.
Yeah, minerals are a big one. Yeah, or
Yeah.
oil now. I don't
hmm
know if that would have been considered at the time. The oil fields.
Yep. Absolutely. Petroleum, huge. Right. Fish in the Maritimes.
Yeah, it's true. Fish literally leaping onto the deck.
Yes. Um, so for Harold Innes, who's the main kind of driving force behind this theory, these economic staples, right, and our ability to more and more export them, right, to go from a more localized economy to a more
Mm,
internationalized, exported-oriented economy, is the central thing that made Canada what it is, right? Or
yeah.
one of the main things that made Canada what it is. Personally, this is where I think it gets more interesting, to interesting territory, because to me, more than geography, economics is one of those things that's more easily transferable from one place to another, right? And can more easily connect. If you insist on having like a unifying theory, which generally is
Yeah, okay.
us, I think economics is probably the way to go about such unifying theories. I don't know if that makes
Yeah.
sense to you. Yeah.
No, no, it does. I get you.
Yeah. Um, and so yeah, basically our um, our basis in natural resources um, would have then supplied the kind of foundation for the development of metropolitan markets, both in Canada and in Europe, right? And therefore connected Canada to itself, right, through various metropolitan centers, Halifax, Montreal,
Yeah.
Vancouver, etc., and metropolitan centers abroad, right? New York, London, so on.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so I'm obviously like oversimplifying these theses for the sake of it. I invite people to like read the books that are the basis of these theses. They're quite good, some of them. Um, but I think so far this is the most convincing one for me. I don't know if you have
Yeah.
anything you want to add on to
No,
this.
well, it's like I sort of was talking about at
Yeah.
the beginning, like the idea
Mhm.
that we are a country based around our developed through the natural resources.
Yeah. Yeah. And even on like again, the framework of more nationalist oriented historiographies that were happening around the time, I think it ties into that as well,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it
Because
also just works more for our more modern world where the economy is like the central driving figure of everything. The
exactly.
geographical ones worked a couple hundred years ago because that was the driving force of the world, explore and find new places. Now we very much live in a capitalistic hellscape.
Yep. Yeah.
And so economic theories are the theories.
Yeah. Which Innes was not uncritical of, by the way, right, in his own lifetime,
Mm,
but he saw it as the reality of both Canada and the world, right, mostly. Um, and so, with that in mind, he was like, okay, well, how do we actually account for this under capitalism and the market system that exists today, right?
yeah.
So I think that's a very good point on your end. Yeah, definitely. Um, the reason why I I emphasize this one is also because it's often considered by historians of ideas, I guess you would call them, to be one of the most important narratives and theses about Canada ever established. Right?
Mm,
Like it's kind of hard to understate. It's kind of hard to establish or to state how important this was to people at the time when this came out, right?
mhm.
The main book that developed Innes's theory, which is called The Fur Trade in Canada, came out in 1930, and it lit a fire in Canadian historiography's ass, right? Like, and people basically ran with it, right? Like, it was basically widely accepted and shaped most subsequent research and the selection of events and issues that were thought to constitute the essential narrative of Canadian history for most of the 20th century. It was just kind of taken as fact after a while, right? And regardless of any issues that we might have with it, right, of like, again, flattening out other ideas, it's kind of interesting that it would manage to do that, right? I just think it's cool on an ideas level that anything had this much success, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know to what extent Innes was like happy about this, right? But like,
probably not very.
Yeah, I don't know. So, as you might expect, so we've talked about this before, but a lot of more left-wing analyses of both history and society tend to focus a lot on economics, right? And it is also interesting how, even though Innes himself was not like much of a lefty, as far as I know, he was pretty liberal, but like kind of center-ish liberal type of thing. But his approach would become very important for kind of left nationalist Canadian projects, right? That would take up this idea of the Staples theory and say, look, right, as an independent nation, we're producing, right, we're the labor and extractive labor behind a lot of the things that people enjoy in the world, and yet we're getting shafted by the United States or by Europe, or from the Quebecois perspective, by English Canada, from the Indigenous perspective, from everyone else.
English Canada.
Right. And so a lot of these left-wing perspectives would kind of like take that up as a grounding for further economic independence, right? Which again, you can agree or disagree with, but is a really interesting development in the history of ideas in Canada. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add on this.
No, I think it's the most complete theory so far, the Staples, but it's almost better if you combine it with the frontierism theory.
Yeah, it definitely fits in.
The drive for resources made us go west and that sort of thing. But again, ignoring certain key parts, key people.
Yeah. As far as I know, Innes, if I remember correctly, he does actually acknowledge the role of Indigenous peoples, right, in the fur trade and its development. It probably could have been more. I haven't read the book in years, if I'll be perfectly honest, right? It probably could have been more, but he's probably better than some of his historian peers as far as where he includes Indigenous peoples and French Canadian peoples, but it's probably not the best. I don't remember. Yeah.
No.
What's interesting, I guess, just a final point, is that it also can touch upon the political and the ideological, right? What economies you choose to favor, right? Or where political actors choose to invest in, right? Politically and economically, has a huge impact on this Staple thesis as well. But yeah, those were basically these first three that I wanted to talk about were the major ones. Okay. There's a few others that I want to discuss. I think they're basically mix and matches of all of the ones that we've talked about before, so we can probably kind of like speed run through them.
Metropolitanism.
Yeah,
the cities are the most important part, and everything else branches up from the cities.
Yes, exactly.
Again, very economically, geographically focused. It does sort of gloss over the sweeping landscapes of Canada, which, is a bit of a problem, since that's more part of the Canadian identity than anything, is our landscapes.
Yes.
Like, don't get me wrong, the cities, there are some very big, important cities here in Canada, but can't really just roll over on the countryside.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Which I think is a larger problem with any large country, is that it has so many parts to it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to imagine basically every province has its own country.
Yes.
Except for like maybe Alberta and Saskatchewan. And even then.
Exactly, which are just kind of like one amorphous mass.
Yeah. But it's like the US, every state might as well be its own country with how different they treat each other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What's The best way that I saw it put for the metropolitan thesis is that it kind of flips the frontier thesis, right? It's not
Mm.
saying that there is no important frontier in Canada, right? It's just that it got the process of historical causation backwards, right? Instead of intellectual and economic developments first starting in the rugged West and then influencing the metropolis, um, places like Montreal, Toronto, Halifax, and so on would have been the driving force of new intellectual influences, right? Mainly from Europe,
Yeah.
but not necessarily, like also from the US and so on. And like wider business networks and governments, which then influenced actions on the frontier, right?
Yeah.
So um, this one, as far as I know, was never like it was taken into full-on books insofar as there were biographies of specific important people in the metropolises, right? George Brown, for example, was an important politician, and he received um, a whole biography from this perspective.
Yeah.
But this was a theory that mostly remained in like the article stage for a lot of people. Um, and again, I can see it. I can see where you're coming from, right? Like marketing, manufacturing, transport, and financial centers, all of these are based in the cities, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Like I get the thought process behind it. The cities are important. Like they do sort of cause the rest of the thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
I just think that again, it's very reliant on glossing over other parts of Canada.
Yeah. It, to put it really simply, it's a chicken and the egg situation,
Yeah.
right? But to the point where it's almost flattening out the differences and it doesn't matter.
Well, it's also these cities in their own way were their own form of frontierism.
Exactly. Right. So it's like it gets into this whole thing of what exactly do you consider the frontier? Is it just quote
Yeah.
unquote underdeveloped or undeveloped places that are the
But then
frontier?
it's also at that point, like if you go back far enough, is Canada just England and France?
Yes. Kind of. Which some people might argue. We're
And
just
then, you know, if you
we're
go
just
back
snow
farther from
British.
that, well, at that point you're just white Africans. Like if
Oh
you
my
go
God.
back, no, but
Words
it's
words to regret.
it's just one of those things. Like it's like whenever people talk about like oh blah blah blah. It's like well realistically we all came from the same place, man.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
if you go back far enough, like we're all fucking like it's the same,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
cradle of human life or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm
I
not
get it.
saying that like I'm not saying what I said, you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that's
no, I get what you mean.
obviously, but it really which knocks at the idea of do we need a unified theory of Canadianism?
Exactly. Good. That's an excellent segue into the next theory, which is called limited identities theory, right?
Let's go.
So this one is mostly tossed up by a historian called Ramsey Cook. And by the time that he was coming up with his like vision of Canadian society, we are hitting the centennial, right? By the like late 60s, more or
Yeah.
less. And his view was like, look, there's a lot of discourse going around right now that is lamenting the fact that there's not a single unified Canadian theory or a Canadian identity, I should say.
Yeah.
And that instead, for Cook, what you should look to is how regional ethnic and class identities were formed in various places in Canada. And in doing so, they might discover a more pluralist vision of Canada, right? And so he's basically offering like the modern liberal provincialist view of Canada,
Mhm.
is what he's offering here. And again, there's a lot of these previous theories that we were talking about kind of fit in with that mold or can fit in with that mold, right? If we take Innes's staple theory, some regions of Canada had particular resources that they emphasized and that made them distinct. The fish in the Maritimes did not exist in Saskatchewan, right? Um, Politically, these places developed completely, um, completely separately at different times in different places, right?
Mhm.
And led to really a kind of umbrella, if you want, of limited identities. Okay? Um, and so Cook again would be a kind of watershed moment in how we perceived the Canadian nation state, right? In part because of the criticisms that you're rightfully bringing up of like, why are so many people trying to flatten out Canada into like this single entity, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that just speaks to the human need to simplify things rather than embrace the complexity.
Exactly. Exactly.
Which is my smart sentence of the day.
Your 10:30 p.m. smart sentence of the day.
We hopped up on gin and tonic.
Let's go.
I had like 4 of them.
Yeah. And so, as a kind of to bring it back to the terms that we've been establishing here, the theses of earlier decades, or the Frontier, Laurentian, and Staples, had basically exhausted for Cook any kind of organizing force that they could have hoped for. Right. By the 1960s, he was like, "This is bullshit. It's done. We can still organize as a single entity, but we're too fractured and we're too different."
Well, again, it's the 60s.
Yeah.
What's happening in 15 years from 1965?
Reaganomics.
Referendum.
That too.
Referendum.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The country's literally about to fracture, so.
Yeah. But you already had the rise of figures, of independent figures in Quebec, or divisive figures on a federal level, like Trudeau, right? He was kind of coming up in the world by this point. Trudeau-mania was starting. People were more and more concerned about the influence of the American sphere, right? And what that meant culturally for different peoples in Canada, right? There was like to use the term of the time, right? The American Indian movements that were happening, right? Black civil rights movements, gay civil rights movements, all of these things were emerging at this time. And Cook was basically saying, embrace all of this as part of Canada, right? Like Canada, if you look back.
Canada.
Yeah. And again, looking back on history, you can kind of see where he's coming from. A lot of Canadian history and culture is just a series of conflicts that eventually maybe resolve into something, but often more than anything, it's just, well, we'll just put the difference over there. We'll put Quebec over there. We'll put the Indigenous people over there, right? And we'll just kind of live in this uneasy equilibrium for a bit until it collapses and we have to recreate that equilibrium.
And everybody will be separate but equal.
Right. Exactly.
These people will sit in the front of the bus. These people will sit in the middle of the bus. These guys will sit in the back of the bus.
Exactly. Right.
And nobody better be saying no.
Oh, God. And the last one I want to bring up, there's not much to say about this one. It's the model of fragmentation, right? Which is kind of, again, it's here, I brought it up, but I feel like it's mostly just a retread in different terms of a lot of the ideas that we've brought up, where each case of colonization is a series of fragmentations, right? You can kind of think of it as how like generations spread or a virus spreads, where one thing separates up into many, which each separate up into many, and there's kind of like so many fragmentations that happen after a while that you get cultures on cultures on cultures.
The waves of colonization have eroded away Canada into a little fragment.
Kind of. Yeah. To really oversimplify that theory, that's kind of the basic point. Right?
It's a metaphor.
Yeah. And of course, because Canada is Canada, what this model argues is that we are in a state of dual fragmentation because of obvious reasons. But again, just one that really ignores certain factors. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gee willikers. It's almost like these theories are all bad, and it's a bad idea that we do it.
So, okay, to kind of cap off, I personally am most sympathetic to Cook and Innes, right? The Staples theory and the limited identities theory. I can kind of see these working together if we are, again, to insist on like these main theories in any kind of way, right? I'm most sympathetic to those. I don't know about you.
No, that sounds about right.
Yeah, okay. It's all beavers.
It all comes back to beavers, man, all right? Those little bastards making their little dams.
That's our theory of Canada is degrees of beaver separation.
Listen, I'm just saying, we're building a lot more hydroelectric dams.
That's right.
Who else builds dams?
Who else builds it? Beavers. Right?
Beavers. Boom.
The beavers were centered around the East Coast, and the further west you go, the fewer beavers there were. Degradation of society based on how far you are from beavers. Boom.
Listen, we're getting angrier. Angry Beavers was a cartoon in the 90s.
Boom. Beavers.
Boom. Moose can get fucked. All my homies are with the beavers.
See, that's what Ida should have called his book, not the fur trade in Canada.
The
All my
more
homies
eager
love
you
the
are,
beaver.
the more beaver-like you are. And Canadians are very eager. I don't know what we're eager for, but we're definitely eager.
We're eager beavers.
Yeah.
God damn it. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to highlight this because it's such a really fascinating snapshot at the desires that people had around like this two world wars to really get this kind of collective identity going on a historical and theoretical
On a
basis.
spiritual level.
Yeah, right. I think actually spiritual is a really good example. Yeah. And it's really an example of things to come, right? With the nationalist movements kicking off post-World War II.
Trudeau mania coming up soon.
Yeah, Trudeau mania, but also it started kind of before him with people like Diefenbaker
Lester B.
and so on.
Pearson.
Diefenbaker, all of these would like really channel and tap into some kind of nationalist discourse.
I mean, it was inevitable with the rise of communism and the rise of the American superpower. We were getting grinded to death by two massive rocks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in many ways, we still are.
Yeah.
Except it's one massive, all-encompassing rock.
Capitalism.
And it wants us to become the 51st state.
Okay. Close enough. Oh, God.
But hey, elbows up.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know. Did you have anything you wanted to add on this?
Do you know what else would put its elbows up?
Beavers.
Beavers. I think I need to go to bed, and that's why we should end the episode.
That's fantastic. Short and sweet episode. Thanks for joining me, Mac.
No worries. I had a damn good time.
Clearly. So, as always, people, if you want to reach out to the show, please do so. Leave us a review on whatever podcast listener you use. Our next episode will be on something else. I don't know yet.
Beavers.
Beavers in World War II.
Yes.
Oh, God. But
Let's
yeah,
talk about Canada's war crimes for an episode.
we can. I actually have one on Japanese internment camps planned. So we can do
I was
that.
also talking about the time we fed the Germans grenades
That too. We can do that. That's
or
awesome.
bomb civilian populations.
Oh, yeah. That's great. I mean, we still do that.
airdropped wolves.
Was that ever confirmed to be true?
I don't know. Probably not.
That's like one of those foundational myths. The airdrop wolf thesis. Oh, God. Anyway, join us next episode on critical beaver theory.
So but we did airdrop wolves into Michigan in the U.S.
Why?
to manage the moose population. That's been Historia Canadiana. I'm your co-host, Mackenzie, and that's Patrick. And I'm going to say to all our beaver listeners,
Cheers. Keep on beaving.
AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.